We'd like to begin by acknowledging that Concordia University is located on unceded indigenous lands. The Kanien'kehá:ka Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters on which we gather today. Chukchoge, Montreal, is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. Today, it is home to a diverse population of indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connection with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. So I'm now going to introduce our general coordinator, Isaiah Joyner. Welcome.
Hey everyone, my name is Isaiah Joyner. Thank you for the introduction, Malcolm, and thank you, Tamara, for coming today. These are some serious issues that it's always good to get community feedback and get perspective on, because the best way to learning is doing and communicating, so that we come from different backgrounds, different ethnicities. So to understand each other, we must really come together, hear each other, and like as Malcolm says, feel free to participate in the discussion. It's more so, I know with COVID and well, different things, you might be multitasking, you might be listening in, but if you find something that engaging or something interesting or even just a question, feel free to ask it, and so that you'll know for future references. And so, yeah, our annual campaign this year has been Black Lives Matter. So we tackled it from various intersectional issues and different perspectives. And today there's going to be some interesting discussions on the legal aspect of different topics that are affecting the Black community. So again, thank you for coming. And without further ado, I'm going to pass you to Walter, who is the LIC service manager, who will kind of like break down the services of the LIC if you ever, like, we hope you never need them, but if you need them, we got them. So make sure to take advantage of it. So take it away, Walter.
Oops. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, you might want to angle your camera a little bit down because you're just uploading. There we go.
Perfect.
Okay, salut tout le monde. Hi, everyone. I'm Walter Chian Tom, and I am the manager and supervising lawyer for the CSU Legal Information Clinic. Basically, we provide free legal information, accompaniment, and as well, any explanation of government forms, or even helping you to fill out any forms as well. One of the among the different fields of law that we also touch upon are discrimination, consumer protection, and as well immigration. That being said, anything essentially that concerns law, we're more than happy to assist you with. And that even includes, for example, criminal and penal. Particularly over the last year, we've been helping students defend themselves against social distancing fines, which, as you realize, are like at least $1,000 to $1,500 a shot. So, so students are very happy that the CSU has this free legal information clinic to help them with that. That being said as well, we're open Monday to Friday, 1 to 5. We have law students from different universities that assist the students with their difficulties. But actually, contrary to what Isaiah said, you don't need to have like a legal problem in order to come see us. You can see us before you have that problem, please. For example, we offer to people, especially clubs, right? If they have a contract, if they have an event that's coming up, right? And they have to sign a contract for an event, come see us about it. And we'll see how we can help you in, trying to explain to you what the contract says. Or if once again, if you're thinking about maybe immigrating to Canada and you're not too sure, come see us before you fill out that government form yourself, send it into the government, and then, probably get a rejection letter, and then come see us when it's almost too late. But, prevention, that's what we love. And anything, if you're not even sure if it's legal or not, just come see us. So we're open, we're available, and as well, hopefully we're going to be able to increase our services as well with the upcoming fee levy campaign. That being said, I will now proceed to introduce to you our honored guests. We are extremely lucky to have Maître Tamara Thermitus. Maître Thermitus was called to the Quebec bar in 1988 after studying law at the University of Ottawa. She holds a Master's of Law from McGill University, focusing on critical theory of race, including human rights, racial discrimination, racist speech, and defamation. Maître Thermitus is currently a visiting researcher at the McGill Center for Human Rights and Legal Pluralism. As well, she was a litigation lawyer at the Regional Office of Quebec of the Department of Justice Canada until 2017. She was a member of the advisory committee chief of staff to the deputy minister of the Indian Residential Schools Resolution Office in 2003. And as well, because she was the chief negotiator for the federal government of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. She negotiated the mandate of that commission in addition to being at the heart of the historic Indian residential schools settlement. From 2004 to 2010, she was also president of the Committee on Cultural Communities of the Bar of Quebec. And I'd have to, to tell you really, it was through that I met up with Maître Thermitus, who to a certain degree, encouraged me also to become more active on social justice issues. So I can go on for like another, 5 minutes, but I think who you really want to hear from is Maître Thermitus herself, who as a jurist, who is as a Black woman, and who has so much experience and knowledge. Once again, we're extremely honored to have her here with us, and I cede my platform to Maître Thermitus.
You're on mute, Tamara.
Yes. Okay, good. So, merci beaucoup. Merci pour la présentation. Thank you very much. I have a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. I would like to thank you all. And as I discussed with Malcolm this afternoon, I have a presentation, but I think it's also interesting for people to just interact and just chat about subject matter. So I'm going to present myself. I made like a small presentation. I have difficulty with small. It's a long presentation. That's why I want you to cut me, and I want you to discuss, and I want to have something very lively, very because I don't want to play in the box. I think that we should play outside of the box, and we should discuss subject matter that interests you and question, and I will do my best to answer them with all my knowledge. And if I don't have any knowledge, I will let you know. So I think that as a lawyer, I've been a lawyer for more than 30 years now. When I started, and one of the facts that you can see from, I'm born in Haiti, but raised in Sept-Îles up north. So my parents arrived in 1967, l'année de l'Expo. So when we arrived, we were and we arrived through Montreal, and my father found a job as a teacher at the high school of Sept-Îles. So we were the only Black family over there. So, and that to be the only Black person in the space, in white spaces, has been all my life the situation, because as you know, immigration law changes around 1967, because before 1967, there was a lot of there was no law, there was more it was by décret, comme on dit en français, by ordering council in English. So, and those ordering council were very tainted by discrimination and racism against a lot of groups. And I don't want to go to the immigration history because I guess that you know it, but discrimination was part of the making of Canada. When you can find some discourse from MacDonald and from, I don't remember his name, but it was in 1940, that say that Canada is a white country. And so discrimination was part, and there was the tax against the Chinese ed tax, also that make sure that to control, and there was a decision of the Supreme Court with respect to that too, that to control the immigration of Chinese people of Chinese descent. So the government at that time, it was in the 1920 something, as I may recall, and the government at that time didn't want Chinese men to bring Chinese women. So there was a discussion in court with respect to the question of the tax. Is the tax the ed tax? Because the goal of the tax was to make sure that people were not able to migrate, because the tax was so high that people were not able to migrate. So that tax make sure that the Asian Chinese descent was not able to create a big group. There was men, and those men were not supposed neither to mingle with white women. So that's part of our history. You probably know the story of the black man who went to the forum to see a hockey match and was not able to be served a beer, and that case also went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, when they asked the question, is it a question of droit de commerce, what de commerce? It says, is it a question of liberty, freedom to make trade with anyone that you want, or is there an obligation to serve a black man? It's a question of public order. So the court said, that in that case, the court said, the operator of the bar have the liberty to serve who he wants. So discrimination was validated by the Supreme Court. So and we're going back to immigration. So in 1987, the government changed its vision and opened the door to more migration. So that's when we arrived in Canada. So when I said that I was alone, that all my life I was alone. So because of the fact that the border were closed to a certain extent to people of color, the first big migration wave was in 1960. So why are we talking about history? I think it's always important to talk about history, because without history, we don't understand context. And to be able to understand the situation, because without history, every event is an isolated event, but history gives you the context to understand what's going on. And I would quote, I would quote James Baldwin on that. History is not the past, it's the present. We carry our history with us. We are our history. And if we pretend otherwise, we are literally criminals. I attest to this. The world is not white. It never was white, cannot be white. White is a metaphor for power. So, and that's why for history, for people of color or people who are racialized, is very important, because that's the way we come in society, and that's the history frame our body in the power context, because without history, we don't understand our outcome. So we came to Sept-Îles, we were alone. My father, as every immigrant, has to do some courses to be able to become a professor. There's these équivalences, as we say in French. He's done them. And as you know, when you were a professor at the time, you have to have a permit to work, because he was not a permanent resident. So as an immigrant, you need a permit. 1 year, the permit arrived late. So that situation put our family in a lot of distress, because my father was not able to work for 3 years after that. So we were in Sept-Îles in 1973. My father had three girls, and my mother was not working. So for 3 years, my father, and it's a good thing that I was a child, I remember part of it. but I can now as an adult understand the suffering. But for 3 years, he was not able to work. So we have some money lent by family, but you can imagine the situation in 1973, Cecil, two Haitian parents with 3 kids and the only Black family. So it's kind of, and the reason why he was not hired back is that the permit arrived late. So he went to court, and probably that's why I became a lawyer. He went to court, and finally, 3 years after, he received back his employment and some compensation. And this is the kind of thing that marks some people, and we don't know to which extent when you are a kid, those things marks you. But I think that it's also part of the construction of who we are, the fact that we're not totally treated fairly all the time. So that was the first encounter that my family had with differential treatment, if we can, let's say, racism to a certain extent, but I think it was a different social treatment. After that, I was my father, like every immigrant father, wanted us to go to school to have a bachelor degree and to do our best in school. That's part of the deal, because as you know, immigrant, when they come, the parent makes sacrifice to make sure that we have a better life. And part of having a better life is to have access to diplomation. So at the age of, my father paid for a little school that was the first private school in Seattle. So he paid for that for 3 years. And after 3 years, he realized that the quality of the service was not there. We had good mark, but he was not impressed by the teaching. So he said, fine, we're going to send them back to public school. So I had an average around 85% with all the courses that I took. And when I arrived, at the time there was, and I don't know if it still exists, but there was like a program for students who are like better than the average. So you have access to programs that are a little bit more difficult than the average. So when I arrived, I had the mark, 85 was the mark asked for to do that program. And they said, no. They said, no, you cannot do that program because the school is not good. I said, how come the school is not good? And they said, and I had to make, that was my first fight at 14 with respect to fighting for my rights. So I said, the marks are there. I want to have access to math, science, physics, chemistry. I want to have access to those courses. And they said no. So I fight with them. And at one point I had to say to them, I have the mark, you have to take me into that program. And who's going to pay the price? If I fail, who's going to pay the price? I'm the one who's going to pay the price. So I want to have the program that I have access to. So finally, I had that program, but that was my first fight at 14. So at 21, not at 21, at 19, I decided that I wanted to go to law school. My father wanted me to be a doctor. You know the story, immigrants, often our parents want us to be doctor, engineer. I wanted to be a lawyer. So I had again, my marks were around 80. So I went to see the career advisor. And I said, okay, I want to go to law school. Can you give me some advice so I can go there? And she said, you won't be admitted in any law school with your mark at 80% in science. I said, yes, are you sure of that? Oh, no, you won't be admitted. I said, okay. So I took my paper and I applied, and I was able to be accepted in 3 faculty of law. All that to say that it talks about the way people frame us as minority, who has like a young Black girl in Seattle saying that she wants to go to, and that year I was the only one that was accepted in Seattle to go to law school. And if I had listened to her, I would have never gone, because she told me that I cannot do it. But I said no. So one of the things that you have to, and it's all the time in your life, and I know as a student, you surely live the same kind of experience, But what is very interesting, I've done a conference in Paris in 2012, and the same story has been told to me by French students. One was Black, the other one was Muslim. So the story that you're not able to go to law school when you're racialized, it's a story that it's more like a systemic story than an individual story. So it's very important as a minority to understand that it's not only a conversation about who you are or what you are able to do. The conversation that you have with some people who are either in good faith or in bad faith, or either influenced by unconscious bias, but they will see you, but also frame you in a way that would limit your possibilities. So one of the things that is very important is always second guess what people are saying. And the other part is difficult because there are so many messages in society that are negative with respect to minorities, but to have faith in yourself, to have faith in the capacity that you have, and to believe that you're able to do it. Because if I had listened to her, we won't have that conversation today. I would have said, okay, thank you. And maybe I would be a waitress or whatever she thought that I would do. But it was impossible that 80% in science was not enough to go to law school. Because as you know, we don't need science to go to law school. And science is more difficult than human science, at least at the CEGEP level. So this is it's also like a pivoting moment.
A pivotal moment, yeah.
Yeah, pivotal moment that you have to ground yourself, and it's interesting to listen to what people have to say to you, but as a minority, you cannot assume that everybody will take your best interest at heart. And I learned it very quickly. Sometimes I forget it, but I learned it very quickly. So
do you think do you think these are like these moments that you described, they were like issues of systemic barriers that were based on like race, and so therefore these were forms of systemic discrimination, like systemic racism?
I'm talking to you about the fact it was in the 73. I think it was surely unconscious bias, and unconscious bias and systemic discrimination goes hand in hand. So I think that there was something about that, because if you look at, and that's giving me an opportunity to talk about merit, because if you look at the marks are supposed to be neutral. So I had the marks, so I was supposed to have access.
Right.
So if I don't have access with the mark, other question has to be raised. And those questions I assume that have to be raised about also the notion, what is merit? Because if I had the mark, I have access to the position. But it seems, and I think that it's still happening. I don't think it's over, as I told you. And when you ask me if it's a systemic matter, I would have to answer yes, because how come in Paris, some girl in 2012 are living the same situation that I live? It's systemic. It's the idea that the Black body or Muslim or visible minority body adds some stigma attached to it, because normally marks are marks, and marks is, if it's 80%, marks are marks, and you're supposed to have access to those marks. So I guess that it's, and I say, when you ask if is it systemic, part of it is surely systemic, because if I look at 2012, what happened to those two girls, it's the same situation. And it's surely unconscious bias, because they don't see you as a professional, as their capacity to be a professional. They put you in pigeonholed, and that's the way they see you. It's so my answer is that's my full answer, I guess. Any
So
other questions? Right?
was your goal to go into law in order to like make these kinds of corrections in the systemic I guess the barriers that you faced or that your family faced? Because you mentioned
I said I could say that my father, because I'm and I don't, because I'm not going to talk about colorism, but to a certain extent, it's part of my life too, because my mother happened to be white when you look at her, and my father looked like Sidney Poitier at the time. And my father was very discriminated in Haiti. So we never had conversation about discrimination. This question is just like the family who had like some trauma, just like Holocaust. Some of the first generation don't speak about them. So I learned the stigma of race by myself. My father was not talking about that because I guess that he wanted to put that behind him. So I said probably unconsciously that I had that feeling. And my father was a lawyer, but he never practiced because we came from Haiti and we were like under we left this dictatorship to come. We went first to and then there's another story of race, but we were first in Morocco, and after that we go to Africa, to the Chad, and after that we arrived to Quebec. Because when I say there was another story of race is that when my father arrived to Morocco, he had a contract, for example, of 10,000 K a year, and they said that the contract was 1,000. They took off a zero when they saw that it was a black man. That this story was confirmed to me 5 years ago. That's why, and I never knew before that was the fact that he was a black man, that they took off a zero. It's an American woman that explained to me the social context, and she said that when your father was black, they took off the zero when they saw him. So our life is like a life that is, say, our body are like tainted by race, and it's our experience is that my experience of life is an experience of a black woman. It's not an experience of a woman, and my experience is an experience of intersectionality. And I cannot say that I'm a woman and a black person. I'm a black woman who are like experimenting life. That's that's who I am. That's the life that I had to live. So, is that answering your question?
Yeah. No, that was perfect.
And so that's it. So where am I? I lost myself. I lost myself in my own life. That's good. So, okay, when I arrived at the Faculty of Law, I was the only black person. It was in 1988. So I was in Ottawa, the only black person. So for me, it was the usual, but today for you, it's totally unusual to be always alone. So there was an incident that was kind of strange because we had to do moot court. Everybody was paired with somebody else. Me, I knew nobody. So finally, I was the only person who made this. We were two person, me as a black woman and another girl who made the moot court alone. Everybody was paired with somebody else. I was like, like a little black sheep. So I've done it as usual. I've done it. So I've been through it. I finished my law degree, and I started my career in Quebec City. And a few years after working at the Department of Revenue, my boss informed me that when he hired me, 3 lawyers went to his office saying that they don't want to work with a black woman. That was Quebec City, 1988. Interesting to say that today in the newspaper, the La Presse, there was an article with respect to hiring, embauche, hiring, whatever, I'm not able to say it. Anyway, and the posting was they wanted to have a white nurse to work for them. So thinking that the idea that racism it's an idea of the past and it won't surface anymore, I think that it's a bad lecture of the social context, because we looked last week, a Black woman suffered in the hospital and died without the proper care. This week, an Aboriginal woman was asked to sing a song in her Aboriginal language, and they wanted to name her Joyce, and the nurse started to laugh. So what kind of social context is that if it's not a social context that is totally tainted by race or by difference or their differential treatment? And the same for like the way Asian people are treated since the COVID, and they are like discriminated, hate crime with respect to the fact that they are Asian. So we cannot say that racism is, again, it's far from us. I think that we're still living in a race space, a white space that are tolerating colored body, generally speaking.
Do you think that like pursuing kind of like activist work through a legal like there's different ways of doing activist work? Do you think that like doing it through like legal manners is like an effective way of doing it in your experience?
The legal system is a system that is moving very slow. It's really related to its nature, because the legal system is based on precedent, generally speaking. So when you look at the legal system, the judge will look at precedent to make his decision. So it's not, as I told you before, there was the charter changed some situation, but there's also a lack of understanding of social context. There's also a lack of understanding of social context, not taking into account social context, and the judge don't see. Well, the majority of the judges, they don't see race. They are like an approach to justice which is colorblind, instead of an approach that will be more race conscious. Because if you want to have good decision, and there's some good decision that also come from the court, there's some hope, but there's many decisions that are like colorblind and they don't take into account context. And the Supreme Court had to correct some of them. Some of them are not corrected by the court. And the court process is quite expensive and quite also inefficient because it takes too much time to resolve problems that should be resolved very quickly. And the way that the notion of discrimination and race is defined, it becomes very difficult to understand that there's discrimination. And it's always fascinating when you are like a person who are discriminated, you see discrimination very easily. But when you're a white person, and probably it's related to the notion of white privilege, your capacity to see discrimination is totally different. It's as if it doesn't exist, and as if sometimes everybody have the same experience in life. My experience in life won't be the same that the same of the white lawyer of 55 years old. It won't be the same. And when I was doing advocacy, because I done advocacy in the system, as you know, and for example, I participate in changing the bar courses to make sure that there will be a social context. And when we discussed social context, I said to the chairman of the committee that, he benefits of some privilege. And his answer, and he was a white man, he said, no, I work hard. I said, that's not the point. The point that you're working hard, it's one thing, but the fact that you work hard and you're a white man, you have access to things that I won't have access to, or I will have some difficulty to have access to. So the notion of meritocracy is embedded in the system. And when you know that meritocracy is a myth, that meritocracy is not functioning well, because it's also corrupt, if I may say, by sexism, racism, discrimination against LGBT, discrimination against handicapped people. So discrimination against people like the Aboriginal people. So how can you say that meritocracy is working? Meritocracy is not working. It's a myth. And we have to challenge that, because when I was for years, as Walter said, I was in the federal government, and the merit principle, it's nice on paper, but you can put whatever you want on the merit principle, because you are the one, the people in power are the one who are shaping the merit principle. So they're going to decide which criteria are important and which criteria are not important. And so that's part of the problem of to be able to move things, because at the same time it's difficult to have, because to be able to make real change is when you have power. And power, people, when they have advantages, they don't want to lose their privilege. And it's a difficult situation, because I was listening to a show on TV, Quebecois show, with respect to race, and they was talking about Canada, and they said the white woman was Natalie Petrovsky. She said, we're going to lose our privilege. Yes, indeed, it's privilege. You should lose them. You should share, because it's supposed to be a distributive justice system. You're not supposed to have like the pie all for yourself. You're supposed to share it. But the problem is that when you're talking about sharing the pie, the conversation becomes a lot more difficult, because it's not about going to a manifestation and say Black Lives Matter. Like, Black Lives Matter, yes, indeed. It matters to an extent that you have to share the pie. You have to make sure that people have access to justice, they have access to medical services, they have access to good work, they have access to big job. That's what is Black Lives Matter, and it's the same for the Aboriginal people and all the minorities, and the same for the handicapped people. People should have their share.
So as a student, like Concordia as I guess we've done a lot of like in the street protests against like BLM, let's say, against the increase in tuition, and obviously like there's some effectiveness to it. But compared to like, I guess, internal activism, can you describe like what it's like to be an activist internally, and like what the pros and cons are, I guess, of it, and like how we could help, like how are they related, and how do they differ?
But the thing is that the problem with change is, when you like internet, what I can see, and we discussed that this afternoon, and the fact is that when you look at the result of what we have done, it's difficult for me to share like advices, because the results are not very probant. We can see that there's a lot of work that has to be done. But what I would say, for example, if I take my experience in the Indian residential school settlement, we work hard indeed, but there was a political will to change things. It was under Martin, and Martin, the Prime Minister Martin, had as a priority Aboriginal people. So it happened because he wanted the change to happen, and he was ready to make the push. So it happened, despite of the fact that he was under a minority government. So yes, we need the grassroots to push, but the push has to be from a lot of side, because if I take this as a template, there was the MPD that was pushing more than the Liberal. They were more liberal than the Liberal with respect to Indian residential school settlement and the way we should operate about it. There was the Aboriginal that was pushing at it. There was the elder that was pushing at it. And you have a government that was open to change. But we had also to have pressure for the media so they can move more and there was a minority government, but you have to have all those pressure, because one thing alone won't make change happen. Because when one person is the one who's pushing for change, when that person left, usually it seems that things fade out, because you have to have always have a legacy plan. But if the legacy, you have to find somebody who was going to make the same fight to make sure that it survived. Because if not, what I saw is that it fade away, and you have to restart again, because there's no real change, because the people who have the real power are still in place. So just, you can make some leeway, and you will lose part of it. And that's it. It's kind of baby step, but there's a step that maybe you're gonna lose. Maybe you're gonna make 5 steps forward, and you're gonna lose 1. So it's always, you have to restart again, because powers don't want to be shared. They want to keep the things that serve them properly in the same state.
Thanks.
Anyway,
That was
c'est
perfect.
bon?
Ouais, c'était bon.
C'est bon?
Yeah.
Other
Tamara,
questions?
one of the things which you mentioned as well, right, was that you're saying how it's important to get involved, for young people to be involved, and how not to take no for an answer, right?
Yes.
What legal and life skills can students develop in order to become more effective advocates and activists, especially from your perspective as an activist that has worked within the system? Like, you've worked within the system.
Yes.
You see how it works, right? So what legal and life skills can they develop, and how can they get those skills?
But one of the skill that is, as you said, I'm not young anymore, because I also observe society, and what you can see is that communication skills are like very, very important. I think that the capacity to be able to engage people with you to make change possible. So communication are very important, and the capacity also to create groups that are going to support you, and that you believe in, and that you can share. Because my way was, and I pointed at the beginning, it was very alone, in the sense that I took my own capacity and I put them on the table, and I push. So I have good result, but I have also bad result, because I was alone. So what we can learn from that is that, yes, you have to build your own capacity to be strong on the subject matter. So that's what I've done. I've done my master's degree. I've done it. I was 45 after working like maybe 15 years on those issues, meaning Aboriginal issue. But when you look at the Aboriginal file that I've done, it's not related to Aboriginal law. It's related to systemic discrimination, because the case of Indian Residential School was a case of systemic discrimination and the impact of colonialism. So that was the case. So when they look for compensation for abuse, the abuse was done because there was like a policy that put children at risk, and because what was the main goal of that policy was to take out the Indian in the kid, because the goal was also to show that we're taking the Indian from the community and make them quote unquote white. It was easier to destroy that community and make that community obey to white principle, or like the white way of life. It didn't work at all. But that was discrimination. So what I've seen, for me, I was alone, so I perfect myself. I've done the work. I have some allies, but the situation for the youth today is very different. And we have to understand that when I've done my master's degree like 10 years, 11 years ago, the language that we read in the newspapers, such as white privilege, intersectionality, color blindness, this language was the language that we use in university. So now the language and part of the theory is filtering down. And that's a good thing, because we can discuss and we can create alliance with the knowledge, and there's argument that can be made. There's some people don't like them. We don't read the Journal de Montréal, but those arguments can be made. We have, like, the thinking that was like started with critical race theory in '84 now is part of the current language. You can read intersectionality in the newspaper. So, and you can just put that on your phone and you're gonna have an avalanche of articles. So this is very different. And this is very stimulating, because the tools are there and they can be used. Because 10 years ago,
but it starts at once again, as you said, at the universities.
Yeah.
And it starts with the students that push for this, because we see this at the CSU and at Concordia. It's the students that are pushing, are much more progressive than the institution.
Sure, and that's what, and that's why when I was looking at preparing my presentation, I thought about May 68. So your student, you don't know May 68. May 68 was a big challenge by French students against the establishment and against the university to push them to change, to do some changes. And I think that we are in that kind of moment, and we have to take opportunity of it and have to be strategic about it and to find a way, because we are like, I think, in de façon morcelée, but we have to use the tool that we are using this afternoon, which is the internet, and try to brainstorm together and try to be strategic. And now I'm sitting in meeting with young people who want to present themselves at the municipal level. It's a Black group that they want to present. There was a group of young Black men and women who wants to present some candidate at the municipal, at the federal, and at the provincial level, and they are pushing for it. So those kind of discussion should be open. I will speak to those people if they are ready to open, because now they're taking care of Black people, but this has to be open to minority, so they can groom people. They do like conferences, and those conferences are every Sunday night from 8 o'clock to midnight. So you participate, and they bring people to make presentation. They bring MPs, they bring people from the city to get the knowledge to present yourself, to try to change the system, because the system has to be pushed by the grassroots, but you have also to have some people in power, and you have to help them by the grassroots, because a deputy, a councillor, MP, a councillor won't make the difference alone. He needs the base to push. And he needs also alliance with the newspaper, so the newspaper can bring the article that will bring change, because it's so awful that people want to move on. And, so this action of change, and you need the intellectual to be able to prepare the theory, to be able to articulate things when you go to court, so you can move things to court. So the learning that I have at 50, almost 56, is that you have to find a way so we can move all together to be able to bring change. That part is more difficult in neoliberalist society, is that everybody has to put aside their interests and to look at the biggest interest and to move things, because neoliberalism for minority is not good. Everybody knows that, and we won't change it for sure, but we have to push it in a way that we at least can take more than peanuts because sometimes that's what we get. It's peanut to make sure that we're going to vote. And now we have to have people in place, but not, and I'm going to be very clear, not people who are like token, but people who are able to walk the walk and talk the talk. And to be, and you need to build your courage also, because you have to be courageous, because sometimes there's a price to pay. As I was telling Malcolm this week, I have the opportunity to went to the museum to see an exhibit of a young Black artist. He sold one of his painting to the museum, and with the money, what did he do? He create a fund to make sure that the museum will buy some painting from minorities. And an artist today is rich, maybe tomorrow it won't be rich, but he walked the talks. He took that money. He could have bought a condo with it, because I think he's selling over 50K. His work is kind of expensive now. But anyway, he took the money and went to the museum saying, okay, I'm putting that on the table. Can we do a fund? And that's his walking the walk and talk. And it's quite, for me, I was very impressed too. He's only 30, 33, 34. I was very impressed to see that. But that's the kind of energy, the kind of movement, the kind of commitment that we need to do to be able to move on. And the question that you could ask is that, how come the museum, and the real question for me was, how come the museum did not do it? Because it's part of the mandate of the museum is they should not have waited for that Black artist to give them the money to start the movement after this summer. How come they don't do it by themselves? So when I say that there's a lot of work to do, there's a lot of work to do, seriously, because it's amazing that that guy exists. But if he was not there, they would do like, white privilege, white cocktail, and continue the thing. It doesn't work like that.
Tamara,
yes.
Can you speak about, for example, the concept of mentorship?
Me, I don't believe in mentorship.
Okay.
I will be very frank with you. I believe in sponsorship, because that's what white people are doing among themselves. They sponsor each other. They don't mentor.
What's the difference?
So we need sponsor, not mentor. You can have mentor for the fun of it if you want to have chat, but what you need is somebody that says, you know what, Malcolm, I believe in you, I'm gonna back you, and I'm gonna do what we need to do. And if you make a mistake, I will be there for you. We're gonna correct that mistake. I will help you. I will show you the rope, and I will make sure that you're gonna get there. Because that's what they do. En français, c'est la notion de dauphin. That's what they do. They don't mentor. Now, you have mentorship program. Okay, fine, good. But at the end of the day, you need somebody to open the door for you and to make sure that you're safe when you are in a place. Because as a Black person, it's like, I was reading something when Kamala Harris was nominated as the vice president. So people say, you broke the glass ceiling. Make sure that somebody swept the floor before you arrive. And I think it's a really good thing to do. Because breaking the ladder, and I think that Biden's gonna cover her properly, but broking, and I think that she have, what's one thing that is very interesting about Biden, she's not alone. He put a lot of minority, a lot of Black people, so she's not alone around the table, because being alone around the table, you are like in the worst position ever, because you are a target, because you're like trying to change things. The power that wants to change, they want to, because they are happy, everything is working for them. You have to understand that it's working for them. So why do they will change?
Right.
So if you want to do, and that theory came also from women. If you put one woman in a board, she won't be able to make change. If you put 4 women in a board, you have more chance to do, and they're gonna protect. They're gonna there's a risk. I don't want to say that they all do it, but there's a risk that they're gonna, strategize and, protect each other. But, I don't know if I would put money on that, but Terry is saying that alone, you're like, alone, you're a target. You just have to draw the thing on your forehead.
So that brings me to like another point before we maybe go to the questions, right? And that is, the work that you've been doing for so long, right? And which activists, okay, especially young activists, right? They look at that work. Oftentimes it's thankless, it's frustrating, it's so energy, so it takes out so much energy. How do they avoid burning out? How do they even recognize that they're burning out? And what about the whole idea of a life work community balance?
Well, this is a difficult question for me to answer, because I could have been like in my life, I've been in situations that I suffer a lot. Let's put it this way. And what you need to do, I think that it goes that, searching for light in every situation that you live. You have also to build on your knowledge, because whatever is going to happen, life is not easy. Some people have it more easy, but there's always challenges. But you have to look for light. You have to look for what is important for you. And I'm going back to what I said at the beginning. You have to believe in yourself. Whatever is going to happen, you have to believe in yourself. You have to love yourself, appreciate yourself, recognize that you are able to do things, and that I guess that's about it. And be surrounded by your love. For sure, you have to love yourself first, but having a few, because you won't have 10, you won't have 20. If you have 5 good people in your life that you can speak truly, that you can share, that provide you with love, with friendship, kindship, respect, it's a good thing. You have to have that. Me, I'm not a big fan of sport, to be honest. So, but I do some meditation, but I'm not very good at it neither. But I found somebody present me to a man who, and I'm going to give you the name and you can go there. There's a lot of YouTube. It's Institut Monroe. So you put like a earphone, and it's like you listen to sounds, and the sounds, and there's explanation on the internet. I'm not a specialist. And the sound, and that's the way it was sold to me, is that the fact there's one sound in a ear, the other one, and there's a wave in your theta wave. I won't go to the detail because you're going to say that I'm crazy. But anyway, all that to say that you go to Institut Monroe, you take the meditation. If you're not able to meditate, because meditation need to make the void in your head, and it's not necessarily easy all the time, those sounds bring you to a state that is akin to a monk who have done 20 years of meditation. So listen to those songs, calm you, give you the opportunity to descendre au niveau de stress, descendre au niveau de stress, put your stress level down. Yeah, put your stress level down. And that gives you also the opportunity, and listen to music, good music. And, sounds are very good. We don't understand that all the time, but sounds are very, very good. And l'Institut Monroe, I will send a link to Malcolm so you can share with the people who are listening. But I think that is very important. And also, if you do things with passion, it's less difficult than if you do it. If you believe in what you are doing, the burden or the poids, it's less difficult to carry on and continue. That's what I think. If I can share, and as I told Malcolm, I will refer to Harry Belafonte when he came in Montreal a few years ago. Harry Belafonte was a friend of Malcolm X, and there was a friend of what's his name again?
Martin Luther King.
Martin Luther King. He was one of the artists who financed some march and everything. So we came to Montreal 10 years ago, and a person stood up and asked him, "Can you give us some advice?" And Harry Belafonte said, "You know, my life was a life with a particular circumstances. So I cannot give advice. I can share my life, but I cannot give advice because every life is different. So you have to take my advice for what they would." Nothing much.
All right. If we may, one of the initiatives that you've started, right, or helped to start, is a petition.
Yeah.
Can you talk a BLM petition within the justice system or justice, in general? Can you talk to us about that?
Oh, it was an afternoon of November, and I was listening to the news, and I said, no way that we cannot say nothing. So I spoke to a few people, and it was very organic. So we decided to make that letter, and we received almost 1,000 signature, and after that,
can you just provide, because some of the people haven't had a chance to look at the letter. So if you just talk a little bit about the content of the letter and what it's about and what it's asking, particularly because we do have some people that perhaps for them the idea of it's still not clear that the definition for discrimination is an impact based criteria and doesn't necessarily have to involve intention, as our Cher Premier Legault says, because Quebecs don't intend to be racist.
No, and I think that on that I would say, and we spoke a little bit earlier about the idea of the unconscious bias, and I would quote Professor Charles R. Lawrence, who was talking about discrimination and racism, or how racism is part of our culture. It's ingrained in the culture. So I can be racist. You can be way racist, Walter. And we have always to check us, because we are like in that big soup, cultural soup, that bring us a lot of information that are biased. And we have to be checking ourselves all the time. Minority, maybe less than the majority, but everybody has to be careful, because we can be racist because we are in an environment, in a structure of power that is racist. So Charles R. Lawrence sums it up in that way. Americans share a common historical and cultural heritage in which racism has played and still plays a dominant role. Because of this shared experience, we are inevitably share many idea, attitude, and belief and feeling and opinion that attach significance to an individual race and induce negative feelings and opinion about non-whites. To the extent that this cultural belief system has influenced all of us, we are all racist. At the same time, most of us are unaware of our racism. We do not recognize the way in which our cultural experience has influenced our belief about race, or the occasion in which those beliefs affect our actions. In other words, a large part of the behavior that produces racial discrimination is influenced by unconscious bias. So when we say systemic discrimination, we're talking about policy, decision, systems that are made for a group of people, because when majority design system, they design system that serves them. And maybe it won't serve us. So maybe, generally speaking, it's serving us, but not in a, you have so many examples, I don't have to name them, but you have to deconstruct that system to look at it to see, is everybody is getting his share. For example, and it was the Supreme Court make the decision in a case about women, and the example that people use, and for example, it's the example that is known is the fact that when you were like to become a policeman, you were supposed to be a 6 foot, says 5'7", for example. So if you were a woman, you were not able to get into the police. But systemic racism is like, and we're going to talk about the action that have been brought by the Black civil servant in the federal government that give us a lot of idea how systemic discrimination arrive in society. And it's, when you look at the way police people treat Black person, Asian people, Aboriginal people, it's not a question of bad apple. And that's the way it's currently framed. We're going to throw away those bad apples. No, it's a system. It's a system because we all agree we're all the same, and we all agree that we're going to behave in a certain fashion. And we are not able to see what we are doing because we are among ourselves. So it's not clear to us, just like the notion of white privilege. They don't see that they have a privilege because they all have the same privilege and they don't see it. The argument that they will make is that poor people are just like Black people or like minority or Aboriginal. It's not true because, as we know, race is not class. And class, when we're talking about poor people, we're talking about class. We're not talking about race. And we're working on something about Negre Blanc d'Amérique. And this paper, like this book, is a big problem because Quebecers think that they are a Negre Blanc d'Amérique, and I'm putting the word nègre entre guillemets, and I'm putting that N word, and it's not the case because the N word in N d'Amérique is referencing to the race of the person, and race have an impact. White Canadian, French Quebecois live some experience of discrimination. We agree, but they were never slaves. They were never they were never like, you can never buy a white Canadian. That's not the situation. And there was slavery in Quebec. So this is part of the story. And when you say N d'Amérique, it doesn't work like that. And and I'm sorry for using the word, because I'm making the argument that the word should never be used, because the N word has a trauma that goes with it. And for me, and I make the mistake to use it twice, and I'm sorry for that, but for me, you cannot use it. And you can see I use it and I'm against it because I'm part of a system that is using it. So that's an example, a systemic way to think that you are influenced by something that you don't believe in. That's a clear example that just happened now, and I don't think that you should reuse it, because as soon as so many people suffer from it, and as soon that word became a concept to put some people in a box, we cannot use it as a society. And we have to say that, we're going to use another thing, or you're going to use noir, or you're going to use, but you don't use that word and it's a question of respect. It's a question of progress in society. And just like in Truth and Reconciliation, it's recognizing the past and the impact of the past in the present. So that's why we cannot use the N word in its full-fledged in the journal, in the TV, and in public setting, in school, we cannot use it.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm sorry, Tamara.
Vas-y.
No, it's just that we want to give a chance as well to the students to ask their questions. So, but
Yeah, feel free
that
to
being
ask.
said, finish off. Yeah.
Okay, go.
Anyone could just jump in here, but I'll get it started. I have some questions of my own, but feel free to hop in. Anyone else who hasn't asked anything.
Hi, yeah, so I'm Nikki Barbo from Bishop's University. I'm Cree from James Bay. I don't know if you guys have heard of the situation at Bishop's University right now. I have a question where there is a law that the EDI, that equity employment, that's imposed on all like institutions, and Bishop's has not applied it for like employment equity. Is there any suggestions or recommendations on how us as students, like the Indigenous Cultural Alliance, we want to bring that up as the main issue, and because we have really a lot of underrepresentation of Indigenous people and BIPOC people at Bishop's, like what would your recommendations be on approaching this situation?
Yeah, you have a big question there, and I would say that I don't know the context, to be honest with you. I heard about it a little bit, and I saw a new article in the newspaper. And what under the law, I think that the university has to be representative, and I don't know where they are standing after the situation, because my understanding of the social context is that university are moving along after if I look, for example, at McGill, they came with a plan with respect to the representation of BIPOC people and also Aboriginal people. And there's also the Truth and Reconciliation recommendation that give you a leeway to be able to make some, because how can you have reconciliation without representation? That's the question, because if you want to be able to have the Aboriginal voices heard, and to be able to share your culture, because the question and one of the flaws, and it's not my fault, but one of the flaws of the Truth and Reconciliation and the deal that we have done with Aboriginal people, the federal government in 2003, 2006, it's the lack of funding for language and culture. And everybody knows that. I understand that the federal government is currently trying to compensate, but at the time, there was part of the deal that was done was able to have some money for language and culture, but there was a change of government, and the conservative did not want to put like 800 million that was supposed to be given for like the Truth and Reconciliation. So I think that under that format, there's a way to push university to do it. And I saw that you use the media, and as we said before, I think that the strategy, you have it. You push with the media, you push with the MP, and you push with the student and the grassroots, and you take the format. And you have already the report of Truth and Reconciliation with their like call to action. And there's, I don't remember, is it 83? I don't remember the number exactly, but there's a call that is quite clear with respect to university and public bodies to the understanding of the reality of Aboriginal people, the effect of the Indian Residential School to the communities, and the obligation to have cultural training. But I will go farther than that, because as you know, this week we saw that the two nurses had cultural training, 3 hours of cultural training, which is, for me, it's a joke. But anyway, that's my sense. But it's more than cultural training. It's like, you know, you have to live the experience in the sense that it's going to take a lot of money to be able to understand what happened to Aboriginal people and to live the experience you know, and I say live the experience with some limitation, because we all know that nobody will understand the suffering of minorities, because white people will understand to a certain extent, but they won't be able to understand fully They are just like doctors who understand that we are sick and who understand that we're suffering, but they won't get the suffering. They won't feel the suffering. They will understand it, have empathy, but they won't feel it. So I think that your strategy has to be like multifaceted. Try to have conversation with the university, take into account the precedent that you have in other university, and ask them to act in the same fashion. Miguel have done something. Everything is perfectible, but it's a good start to look at what has been done in other university to make sure that, you know, and the argument of competitiveness is an argument also that has to be made. Because if you want to be competitive, you have to be able to at least have the same tool that the other university has. So I think that if I had to look at the problem and have conversation, maybe find an ally in the if you have an ally in the board or somebody, because sometimes allies, they need people to push. And sometimes you can have conversation with allies who are like part of the management, because sometimes you have like some allies. You can speak to them quietly to see, is there a way that can help you to help me? Because because when minority, as we discussed before, are alone on board, they need the support from the grassroots. Because if they don't have that support, they won't be able. And if you have only one Aboriginal woman or one Black woman or one Asian woman or man or whatever on the board, it's not enough. You need the support of people. You need to be, and you need to have those conversations to be able to put it. So those are my advice. I don't know if they are good, but I think that's what I would do.
And Nikki,
bien.
yeah, and Nikki, if I can add, we're extremely happy that you know, we do have you and representation from bishops, right? Because Concordia has been undergoing the same challenges. McGill, you know, UDM, right? And this is where we're talking about allies internal, but allies external as well.
Yeah, you know, you need to have some allies, and you need to have conversation, and you need to bring some elders, like me and older. And is there any other question? Because if not, we can go really quickly about the question of systemic discrimination. I did not finish it, but for example, in the system, you know, I don't know if people wants to know about, you know, what happened with the black black public servant that are suing government for systemic discrimination currently. And there was a list, and I look at I have a copy of so they are talking of opaque hiring practices and promotion processes. They are talking about exclusion of Black and limitation of at all work level. No representation in the DM, the deputy minister level. Black employee in acting position are never good enough to be promoted. So, you know, they give you the idea that you're going to get promoted, but they keep you at the level, working level, first level, but no representation at the top. So the system is protecting himself. No Black role model in the top echelon of this public service. Non-Black employee exclusion is manifest in the upper rank at the level of okay, Black employees are invisible at the higher level. C'est pas très bien écrit, mais no Black employee equivalent rank is pas d'accommodation, no employee, no accommodation for Black employees. So they are like talking about, you know, lack of promotion, lack of training, lack of mentorship, lack of program, lack of recognition of the impact of the history. So those are the things that they are looking at to show systemic discrimination, because people are not getting their share of the merit principle. Any other questions?
I have a few, but if anyone else has any questions, I urge you to speak before me.
No? No? Another one?
Okay, I had one interesting question.
Nikki, does not have another one?
Oh, Nikki has another one. Okay, sorry. Go.
Nikki, she's looking. She wants to ask another one. Nikki, go ahead.
I have so many questions. It's just that like, everything in your presentation is literally like narrating what I'm going through right now. So like with your experience and feeling like you were fighting by yourself and like you
Yeah,
answered a
man.
lot of the questions I had.
Yeah, sure. You are in the same situation that I was at the time, indeed.
Exactly. That's how there was a lot of like questions where they like the EDI task force had suggested that bishops do training and it's not mandatory. It's like, and I kind of linked it with the tokenism where it's like there's no real like fight for it. Would it be safe to assume that like instead of training, like I mean like not safe to assume, but would it be better to ask instead of like having like a training option for like sensitivity training and to offer like a accredited course, like, or is that like conflicting like in some way? Because I felt like if we offered like a course in it, like you know how in universities like there is like some course that you have to take.
Yeah,
And
I remember that.
I was thinking like if
Oh, you have a baby.
Yeah, she's like yeah.
Nice baby. She's very young.
All throughout the semester, I was pregnant.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I remember when I was negotiating, Aboriginal people always bring up their babies, no matter what subject is discussed, because they want them to be aware. That's part of their like way to see the child.
Yeah.
So ask your question. So you said about the courses that are mandatory.
Yeah.
And
would it be better to ask like the institution to have a credited course where everyone can take part, because we already have something like that in education, but not really like in computer science or like
but you know, your question is quite interesting because the paper that I was looking at, the writing, I mean, there was that question, because the problem is that people doesn't have the base knowledge. Professor neither, like professor who are not like in race theory, they don't know about race. So they do stuff that are probably racist or consciously or unconsciously, but it's not because you are like an intellectual or a professor in university that you will get that. So it's very important. My sense is that we have to fight to have critical race theory or those kind of theory and Aboriginal understanding at all level. Professor have to have to, and it's difficult because we're talking about liberté académique, like, but it has to be a full discussion, and we have to relook at curricula and say, you know, what's in it, what are the impact. And it's a big job because it's not only giving a course on indigenous thing, it's to indigenize the curriculum and also taking into account the effect on Black community and change the language, or at least having a conversation to the necessity of changing language and stuff like that. So it's a bit, and that's what the Truth and Reconciliation commends, but people don't get it. They said, yeah, I want to give you a course, but it has to be a lateral move that will move all the system, because you cannot have just one pillar and think that things will change. So we have to ask for, like, you know, and don't take the argument that it's too soon. It will always be too soon.
Right. I see.
In 2000, so the Truth Reconciliation, it's 5 years now. So it will be interesting to see what are the changes after 5 years. I was reading an article of the senator, and he was not impressed with the change after 5 years. There was an article in the Globe and Mail in January. So I think that we have to push, push, and push. That's our life. And our name are push. Tarek has a question. Tarek, I mean.
Yes. So my question is, what
Let's
do
see
you? Yeah. Okay. Well,
No, I don't have to see you, but I cannot see you. But it's up to you. I can speak to your hand. I will speak to your hand. Talk to my hand. Go.
Well, I wanted to ask you. Yes, I wanted to ask about the use of the N-word in the academic settings, like the whole issue that happens in the University of Ottawa, and because it's discrimination, but it also touches upon the issue of academic freedom and how do you, what kind of language do you use? I just wonder what you think about that.
As I said, for me, I think that the N-word cannot be used in any setting because of the N-word for me is not a word, it's a concept. It brings back, and I wrote an article in a newspaper like about Ababar, and for me it's like a concept, and I used the book of Octavia Butler. The story of the book, to make it simple, it's a Black woman living with a white man, and sometimes she disappears for a few minutes and she comes back. But during the time that she disappeared, she went back to slavery. So for me, the use of the N-word bring people back to that situation because it was created to discriminate, take off dignity. Instead of calling people by their name, you call them the N-word. And at the time, those people were like shadow that can be sold. So what's the fight to use that word? And the problem that we have in Quebec is because the N-word was used by Vallière in the book, N Blanc d'Amérique, white N of Amerique. And that book became a canon that has been used to understand what is the situation of white French Quebecer. And the same for the poem Speak White. But those analogies are not referring to the reality. And when I see, me personally, I'm an Asian and I know the story that, what's his name? L'Immortel, c'est quoi son nom? Danny Laferrière said that he doesn't mind about the N-word. Indeed, he can say that in a context in Haiti, because in Haiti, everybody is an N. They speak, white man is named N too, because N became the synonym of men. But we cannot import that here because it's a contextual interpretation. And talking about the negritude to justify is the same way, because you have to understand the context. And in that context, and I don't want to go there because the question of cultural appropriation is also a question that has to be raised because it's not what it is. The situation of the Canadien Français was a situation of class. It was not a situation of bondage. And we cannot compare the two. And if you do so, you extract from the N-word the reality, and the N-word become ahistoric with no historical content. That's my point of view.
So even, sorry to cut you off, but even in academic setting where you teach about the history.
Because the problem is that you bring trauma. So how can in an academic setting you can bring trauma in the room? And how come people will understand and be able to listen and learn with trauma in the room? So if you tell me that you can bring trauma in a room and people will learn in the same fashion, fine. But if you cannot show me that, how can you do it? Because, and there's some professors that are saying that you can use the N word, just like I've done, to explain the concept, but people can, and people will understand it, and that's it. And maybe, and in the worst case scenario, you can mention it once with warning, saying that I'm going to mention it once with the warning. But the thing is that people could understand because, and we're talking, and the big discussion is about one word that currently, and you know, I don't know why people want to use that word. And I would love them, I have an explanation talking about barrière, but after that, why should you use it? Because I'm telling you that I'm suffering. So you said, I don't mind your suffering. I'm going to continue to use it. That's what you're saying. Because it's an intellectual fashion. But the thing is that you have to remember that university just recently start to open to people that are different in a more massive number. And there are some people who never get access to the school. And when you look at philosophy, when you look, for example, at Hegel, and you look at Kant, they were like, Kant make a classification system with respect to race. So we have to ask ourselves the big question, because me, when I went to do my master's degree, my professor talked to me about Kant. I look at it, I look at my phone and I put his name and I put race, and there was a bunch of things that I didn't want to read. But do I have to learn Kant? Yeah, but do we have to warn me? Yes, he has to warn me.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It does. It's also a very long discussion, and I don't want to take the space of others.
Yeah, but fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have questions? I have one last one. So I was trying to figure out how best to ask this very simple question. Basically, I wanted to understand like what's the best way for students to get involved in activist work. But I have some type of an answer. And basically, so I asked you if your petition is still open, and it looks like it is. So I have the link here that people
yeah, and we have to work on it because we have like 50 people who are interested to do things. So now we have to organize ourselves in our busy work and to find a way to engage people and to see what they want to do and to be able to bring it, because the petition was one thing, but the petition is not enough.
Yeah, so that was my question. So basically there's a form in here that I encourage everyone to sign if you get the chance. But I was wondering, like, with a petition like this, what are the next steps after? Like, what we've had petitions in Concordia, and I want to know like what you plan to do with it.
The next step, I guess, that first we have to make an analysis of the report. We'll start that next week. I was supposed to do that, an analysis of the report and to show the flaws. So that's my intellectual approach. And after that, we have I think to do the same thing that we discussed before: grassroots, politician, engage people, engage journalists. So it's the same kind of a policy will, and that's the way you have to do it. And you have to maybe find artists to be able to, there's a bunch of ways that you can push on the system. It's not only like the legal approach or the policy approach, but there's also artists had a venue to change things because they use emotion. And when people feel that the emotion of people, they are more inclined to act. Because if you only work at the intellectual level, you will have a fight or discussion to say on a word and concept. And at the end of the day, it's about the wellness of people. It's not about neither word and concept. And when you use art, it touch people. It make them move sometimes.
Yeah. Tamara, among two things which the provincial Quebec government did recently, one was to create a ministry on against racism and discrimination. And the other one was obviously the report as well.
Yeah, the report.
And what the letter, from what we understand, it's basically saying, there are problems with the report. Is that it?
No, the letter was before the report. And what the letter asked is about data and government. And the first thing I think that if you want to discuss, you need data. If you want to have budget, you need data. If you want to represent people, you need data. And you need to have data that, because we don't have data, like, for example, there's a group of young people with McGill start something like Color of COVID to be able to show that the question of COVID in Quebec is also a question of race. And so we need data to be able to ask for policies, to ask for budget, to be able to make argument in front of the court. The data are crucial to move agenda. So that's why in the letter we talk about the necessity of recognized systemic discrimination, but the necessity to have data.
Mm-hmm. And what about the creation of this minister for first time?
Well, I'm going to give you the answer of faux.
Mr. Foniemi is the executive director of the Center for Research and Race Relations, who the CSU works very much with as well. And obviously,
no, but I think that, you know, there's a bunch of questions about that secretariat. We're going to see what they're going to do. But the first thing that, you know, I'm going to quote Doudou Dienne, who was a rapporteur spécial, the special reporter for systemic racism, the special rapporteur for racism. And he said that, you know, if you want to solve a problem, you have to name it. So if you want to make a pie and you buy things for pizza, but good luck.
Yeah.
So if you don't name your problem properly, you won't get the right answer.
I'm also going to take this moment to perhaps we can just, there was a question that some young people had asked before, and we had a discussion before this, just before you came on today, about the choice of you know, being involved in the system, especially when we talk about the movement for defunding the police.
Okay, yeah.
Right, because some people, for example, the CSU is supporting a motion at City Hall to, you know, ask that the Montreal Police create a hate crime unit, right? You know, just because of the crying need in order for to be a hate crime unit to help survivors of hate crime. But then there's some people that are saying, well, yeah, but any kind of, you know, money that we give to the police is bad. So,
but I think it's a question of confidence in the system, and that's the question that you have to answer. Because if you don't have any confidence in the system, that's the problem that happened. And you know, it's about also the fact that some group have been under policed when they report crime, and they have been over policed for no reason. So those are the thing, and that's why, you know, defunding the police have some leeway. But the thing is that the question is that, okay, under that crime unit, that the hate crime unit, who's going to be there? Who have the knowledge? How many people with the knowledge and who are like minority with the knowledge and have the courage? Because in those kind of organization, and that's the big thing, because when you have courage, you pay the big price. And because when you raise issue, you pay the big price because the system don't want to change. So having a crime unit on paper look good. And for them, it look good because there's also some studies that have been made about diversity in organization. And those studies shows that diversity have been used by the employer as a defense in cases of discrimination. So you think that you're doing a good thing for the people, but after that, you realize that the system is like turning things around and the diversity become a defense. So those questions has to be asked also for the question of the hate crime unit. Is it going to be served as a defense, or who's going to be present? Because the idea to have a unit, because what people are saying is that we don't have any confidence anymore in the system. Another unit, it's another way to not do the work. But it's not only the unit, it's that you have to ask about who's going to be there, how they're going to work, and what would be the relationship with the grassroots that make sure that the job is done, and what would be the accountability. Who's gonna check if the job is done?
And in order to be able to ask those questions, a person needs to understand how the system works, right? And that's one thing I've always admired about you, is that because you made, I'd have to say, the sacrifice of government and public service, right? You understand that system. Okay.
Yeah,
and because you understand, because you were part of that system, you understand from the inside how that system works. And that makes you a much more effective advocate. And that's what I think to my law students as well. I mean, it's good to critique, but you have to critique effectively.
No, you have to understand what is the nature of the beast. What's the nature of the beast? And it's not easy, and you need courage, but I would say that the situation, it's not perfect, but it's way better, as we discussed about the use of language, the capacity that people have to organize, the capacity to, now you can take internet, Facebook, make a group, make some noise, and you can also have like more coverage, more people engage with you than using the newspaper. So those things, have to be used properly, because we saw that Printemps Arabe give not the result that people expected at the time, but there's tool for change. And if we took the example, and it's a bad example, but we got to do the reverse. Look what Trump have done with Twitter. If you do good with Twitter, what can you do? If we just take the example of Trump, change the story that you want to tell, and see what you can do with Twitter. Because forget about the story, okay? We don't agree with the story, but he used that tool magnifique, de façon magnifique. It's true. It's true. But now, can we, can we use it as a case study to see how can we use Twitter to do good? Can we? Because, information is all over the place, and the guy, whatever you're gonna say, like it or not, he was able to move things with that thing.
All right, I think Trump is a good way to end this talk here.
No, I don't think it's a good way. Twitter is a good way. Trump is a case that has to be unpacked as a way. How can you use social media effectively? Because Trump is not a good thing. I'm not a Trumpist. Never be, never will be. But that's the way. And maybe if we want to finish, we're gonna finish with something that is not Trump. Let me have another quote about history, because I'm a big fan of history.
We love that.
Yeah. History and power. History is the fruit of power, but power itself is never so transparent that its analysis becomes superfluous. The ultimate mark of power maybe is invisibility. The ultimate challenge is the exposition of its fruit. It's better than Trump. If you want, I could send you the quote.
Yeah, please do. I like that. Who was that?
That was Trouillot. It's a silencing the past. Trouillot. It's an Haitian guy. He's dead now. Professor, I don't remember at which university. University are very important. Finishing that the last word, those are professor teaching us. give our tool to be able to do some emancipation in that. And the last word is that, the last word, I guess, is that, you know, the suffering of Black people, Asian people, minority, all groups that are excluded, marginalized people. And if we think last year about George Floyd, but George Floyd, as his daughter said, changed the world. And it's amazing. It's sacrifice to take the word of Walter, changed the world. He changed the way that little video of 9 minutes, which is like torture to be but it changed so many things because people have to listen now. So that will be it's better than Trump.
I want to say thank you for everyone who had the chance to come out, especially like since we're spending so much time on Zoom, that you guys could spend some more after school is beautiful, and I really appreciate it. And thank you so much, Tamara, for doing this with us. I
No
thought it
problem,
was
pleasure.
very insightful.
I laughed a lot.
You did a bit of overtime here, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, that's okay. It was fun.
Yeah, and so yeah, just so everyone knows, this is recorded. I'll speak with Tamara to see if they're okay posting this, but everyone's okay with this being posted on YouTube? Okay, great. Consent is important. All right, I'll pause the recording. I hope everyone has a great day. And
bye-bye. Thank you very much. I have a good exam.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Merci à toi. Bye-bye. Au plaisir. Merci beaucoup.